Welcome to Tap In with us for this very special episode where I'm sitting right next to Maurice Fernandez, evolutionary astrologer, counselor, and teacher, my personal teacher, and author of a few books. The latest we'll be talking about today is the Neptune book, The Timelessness of Truth. Right? Is the title. So for me personally, this is a major thing to sit here with you. You know that?
Thank you.
I've told you we've spent almost a week together at a retreat, and I followed you for many years, and this is the first time that I'm meeting you in the flesh. So I'll just say to everyone who's followed you out there that it's something very different. I've gotten used to it now, but in the beginning I was like, that's whoa. It's something else to meet you like this. And much better.
Okay.
Much better. So yeah, that's really amazing. So I'm glad to be able to do this interview and bring my listeners a piece of you and your wisdom. Welcome.
Beautiful. Thank you for the opportunity.
Good. So just my first little quiz question. I actually may have two, but my first, so it's just small questions, and then we'll get into Neptune, and especially what is Neptune now in the late degrees of Pisces. It's going to shift, so it means a lot. We'll get into that. But first, just because it is the Therapeutic Astrology podcast, what is a classic, typical signature of a therapist birth chart? Could you say something about that?
First of all, I would say it depends on the type of therapy. But if we speak astrology, the most common general signature for therapy will definitely involve Scorpio and Pluto, because it has to do with shadow work and vulnerability. So as a therapist, we're looking not only at the vulnerability, but how to touch on the uncomfortable emotions, the things that are not easy to address in normal conversations. And Pluto does that.
Mm. So Pluto, Scorpio.
Yeah.
That's the typical. And you said, so for a psychotherapist, that would be something. What about Cancer?
Cancer holds the space. One of the things that's needed in therapy is to provide a sense of safety.
Yeah.
So Cancer can provide that, adds to that. So obviously, yeah, it's not just Scorpio, and there's a whole chart to look at. But the water signs, particularly Cancer, Scorpio, Virgo, and Aquarius, I will say, because Aquarius and Virgo brings the analysis and brings, also kind of troubleshooting capacities. So they often show up as well.
Right.
But I would say if you only have Aquarius without the Scorpio and the Cancer, then it can get very detached, and it's kind of I often see strong Aquarius in psychiatry.
I was just gonna say a psychiatrist, yes.
Versus therapy.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not sure if it's showing up on the recording, but we are in a thunderstorm, something in Sedona, where you live. Yeah. So
It's the season. It's late August.
Yeah.
And it brings a lot of the monsoon rains, and it's a blessing because it's a very dry place otherwise.
Yeah. So my next quiz question is around survival strategies. So in therapy, we talk a lot about how we protect ourselves, meaning a lot of what we do and what we think that we are, it's not really who we are. It's not our true nature. it's kind of hidden in our more or less rigid personality, what we identify as. I'm not sure. This is an open question. It's something that I constantly work with in charts to see, but I don't know if is there a signature for our self-protective
Yeah.
strategies, or is it just how we use the chart?
I think there are two sides to this. There's definitely the buffer, where you're going to protect your true self by having these defense mechanisms.
Right.
But if we look at it in another way, it could also be that pure instinct to protect yourself can actually be something that doesn't show up in regular situations, but is very much here. It's a Mars principle where some people think, oh, they're very weak, but then suddenly under stress, in a certain, under threat, something else comes up. Something else comes up, and they suddenly realize, wow, I'm much more powerful than I thought I was. I can take care of myself, and I thought I couldn't. So there's a flip side to that. But as far as I would say perhaps the defense can also be a persona, that what you want people to see versus what's underneath. And you often see people who need a lot of privacy, is because they cannot be their authentic self in public. They're under stress and they have these buffers. So they need to retreat to kind of unpack, take the layers off, and be themselves. And so you'll often see, the Saturn and the Mercury coming in. That can be a form of a persona, what presents well,
Right.
what people need to hear, what I want them to hear, versus what I really think.
Right, because Saturn is cautious.
Yep.
That's what we're going to say. Okay.
Cautious, appropriate, reflective, strategic.
Right. Okay, good. So they were accurate answers. You won the quiz. And, and let's get to Neptune. So, of course, I'm curious because you wrote this book on Neptune and you're a specialist in that. It's in Pisces, 12th house, Neptune. And now it's in its own sign, but it's been there for a long time. And it's ending. So what does it mean in that we are in the late degrees now? It's the first part of the question. Start there.
Yeah, Neptune is a 14-year cycle. First got in 2011, right when there was a Fukushima tragic, global catastrophe in Japan. And so, the first sign of that was that Neptune in Pisces represents, obviously, both literally and symbolically the ocean. It's the ocean in a poetic way, like what unifies everything. And it's the great depth and the mysteries, but it's also literally the ocean. And, that incident polluted the ocean. So now, 13 years later, we are at the tail end of it. And so next year, it's going to move into Aries, retrograde back a little bit into Pisces until fully into Aries in 2026. So the late degrees, obviously, one of the things is that it helps us look back and we can see what, the process was. We started with this ecological crisis. And I think that the theme of an ecological crisis has been consistent with Neptune in Pisces, because Pisces represents, if we speak about the ocean, it represents the womb of life. We all come from the waters. That's where the gestation, that's where the nourishment, that's where we are fused with everything and with the creation. So the ecological issues that we've been confronted with became to critical urgency. You know, it was always there. It started in the 80s, but that's during the Neptune in Pisces that we saw how much we're overexploiting nature, how, you know, what I often say is that if we compare Neptune with Uranus, Uranus has to do with technology and progress and the future, whereas Neptune is the origins. We all, you know, come from the waters, even maybe come from the ocean. And if we kill nature, if we, you know, pollute it to a point of extinction, where there's, you know, many scientists speak about the sixth extinction. One of the function is not just that it's going to be sad, oh, you know, no more of that species and no more of that tree, and it's all concrete, and it's not just a feeling that it would be unfortunate, but from an evolutionary point of view, part of what nature allows us to do is to start over. You know, when you see an abandoned building, what happens is that nature reclaims anything that we are not, that we are abandoning. So why? Because nature regenerates. It composts, it dissolves, and then, you know, that building gradually erodes to come back to the elements. So if you destroy nature, you get to the point where there's no reset button, and every mistake is going to be final. So there's something about both the science of that and the spirituality of that we are contemplating during this transit of Neptune in Pisces. And what is also coming back, you know, in the past 12 years, the first time was 2012, but it's also, you know, an ongoing dialogue. It's kind of extinction. You know, is it the end? Could the world end? Could we be at a point of no return? And that's very much that kind of Pisces reality where there is no reset, that, you know, we reach that finite point. I don't think, you know, it's not a place where we can recover from. You know, I'm not a pessimist, but I do think that we cannot be naive about it either.
Right. Because as I'm hearing you, there is good news in that nature regenerates.
Yeah, nature regenerates, but, you know, when a species goes extinct,
right,
it doesn't come back.
Yes.
You can save one species if you have a few, you know, living specimens. And so we're not yet at the point where there's no more nature, obviously, but it is at a point where if we corrupt the seeds, you know, if we corrupt the foundation, what will happen with that reset? So these are some of the themes I think that have been the most important with the Neptune in Pisces. Is basically, as powerful as we are, as intelligent as we are, is it working? You know, are we really enjoying the benefits of the civilization we created? And I think there's a lot of discontent.
So, and you're talking about nature, but spiritually and...
Yeah, I mean, nature is one component.
Yeah.
And I think it's not just nature. it's also our
Our
nature.
right.
You know, how many layers? How are we living authentically? Are we eating natural food? Are we having a natural lifestyle? All of that. And one of the trends of Neptune in Pisces has definitely been many people wanting to return to nature, to live more simply. Like suddenly, you know, in the 80s, we glorified wealth, and the more you had, the more privilege you had, the greater it was. Now with Neptune in Pisces, like there's almost like a feeling that too much wealth is not healthy, and that greed, excess, and there's a call to simplify, to go back to more communal values, and also to return to nature. You know, you have the off grid, things like that.
A lot of spiritual awakening as well, right?
It's part of that.
It's part of that. So I'm gonna go check. That'll be okay for sound, but I want to ask you about where we are now, with it, what the difference it makes that we're in the end of this. You can talk while I just check.
Okay.
That's just my stats. I want to make sure everything's good. Yes. Good.
So, you know, the 29 degrees, is often considered a critical degree. I mean, it is a transitional degree, right? So Neptune's hitting that 29, it's going to retrograde back. But the very end degrees of any sign are already giving a flavor of the new energy of the next sign, which will be Aries. And yet it's also a point where all that has been done in the past 14 years of this cycle can become more tangible.
Right.
And perhaps reach some kind of critical awareness about it. So, you know, I think that the world is not very stable. Everybody is feeling that we are in transition. You know, whether it's leadership, something needs to change, something needs to break. To me, it's not just, you know, whether old systems will physically collapse, and we anticipate that. You know, as Neptune and Saturn will move into Aries, we can see that it will affect a lot of regimes, whether it's in the Middle East, you know, regime like countries. Yeah. But, you know, think about the Middle East, like Israel and Palestine. Yeah, okay. It's been forever, like a lot of battles and a lot of martyrdom. You know, that's part of Neptune also. It's this feeling of victimization. Each side feels tremendously victimized by the other. And it creates a mentality of martyrdom. So there's something about that 29 degrees that says, okay, we can't just keep going on like this and repeat and repeat and repeat the crisis in all kinds of different forces. You know, sometimes it's more ferocious. So it's just an example to give you how this shift can lead to a new template, like a new brain. You know, the pattern cannot survive into this next phase. We are, you know, in the threshold. So the 29 degree can make us aware of what is old and tired, and we should not take it into our future. And so it is with us personally, right? Because globally, as you say, we are feeling the shift is coming. Something needs to change. And so
within ourselves as well? I'm asking you because I know you also have a certain opinion about outer planets and how that affects us personally as well.
Yeah, I mean, these global cycles are a reflection of anything that happens to us personally, because, but it depends also on how conscious the person is. The outer planet, including Neptune, are the ones who bring evolution.
Mm.
So up to Saturn, we build our lives. We get a job, we get an education, we get married, we have kids, we build the foundation. It's like brick on brick, and then the white picket fence.
Thunder. That's coming.
And we basically establish. When we reach Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, that's when we have doubts. And we start to see that there must be more to life than this. And what seems to be perfect is suddenly eroding. So, absolutely, the change that we feel globally is internal, but quite often, if a person is not conscious, they will only externalize. They will not ask those questions about their own lives. They should, because Neptune at the 29 degree, to me, on a psychological level, goes back to, if I want to simplify Neptune, do I get along with God?
Mm-hmm.
And that also means, do I get along with my fate? Like, do I have a good incarnation or not? Do I make the best of my incarnation or not? So it's kind of a general recap of my life. Am I in a good place? Is my life working for me? Am I cursing God every day for my life? Or am I grateful?
So is it a window of opportunity here? Is it some, can we manifest? I'm laughing because I don't know if you talk like this, but that's the way I tend to view it, because I'd rather use it for something positive, right? So can we see it as an opportunity to create change even more than usual, or is it not that?
There's something about Neptune, as far as a lesson, that the work is not only by, oh, I'm going to get another degree, or, oh, I'm going to change relationships. There are practical things anyone can do that's always available. But from a Neptune point of view, the change is often a change of attitude.
Okay.
It's not external. You can face the same situation, the same world, the same planet, and say, oh, I'm accepting this. I'll make something out of this. Versus, why did I get this? And, getting into the helplessness and victimization. So quite often, when the change of attitude occurs and the gratefulness happens, the energy shifts, and then things happen naturally. So it's not, if you talk about Mars is about go and do, go and kick, go and leave your job. It's action oriented. Neptune is a spiritual attunement, which basically says you're not looking at it the right way.
Okay, so when you say we need to select what we want to bring into the new year and into the future, it's more about what we need to accept. Is it accept or is it change? Is change from acceptance?
I mean, acceptance and change of attitude can then lead to new templates.
Right.
If we keep it simple.
Yeah. Okay. So I wonder if you have had new realizations since that book about Neptune? I mean, maybe you haven't because it's a very thorough book, but has Neptune showed you something since you wrote that book? Well, in Pisces or else? Whatever you come up with.
You know what? It has. Not so much that it's new, but the same paradigm. In the book, I describe Neptune through 7 stages of evolution and how we come into this world very pure from a Neptune point of view, very naive, coming from paradise, so to speak, coming from the womb. And then we have to descend and realize that God is not going to save us from pain, that we need to develop our immune system and that we didn't have. So, and then, you move through the different stages of building that immunity and connecting to your fears and finding your destiny and reclaiming your spirituality. And what does it mean? Every placement of Neptune will capture how you can spiritualize your life. But it became more and more obvious to me after I wrote the book that part of the spiritual realization is not to go back to spirit, but it is to live here in harmony. And I mean in finding this dimension where everything is dance and where everything is more threatening. You're not as safe because you're more safe in the spirit world. So in some ways, what I really fine-tuned in the past years is that enlightenment is accepting your incarnation.
Wow.
And being in spirit is easy. It's why we want to go back there.
Yeah, it's very meditation can be so seductive. Like I just want to float here.
And Neptune speaks about escapism. So the typical thing you read in classic literature, it's like the alcohol and the substance abuse because it numbs the pain. So the great difficulty of Neptune is dealing with suffering. And it's trying to numb the suffering because it doesn't have the immune system to cope. I mean, it's building the immune system to cope with suffering. And so the escape can be through substance. It can be by just denying problems. But spirituality can be an escape. So the retreat, renouncing the material world. Quite often, I hear people who come through some spiritual epiphany where they say, I don't want to own anything. I don't want to be part of the rat race. And I question, well, is that an escape or is that accepting your incarnation?
Well, we shouldn't be part of the rat race, per se.
The mouse race.
Okay.
What I'm saying is the friction and, dealing with power struggles is what makes us maybe smarter. And I'm not one to just say tough love, toughen up. And
No.
I do think life is to be enjoyed and celebrated. But I also think that stress and friction, helps us expand our brain. It's very interesting, speaking specifically about a Neptunian reality, when we look at vegetables that are grown through hydroponics, which is a system where the vegetables are grown through waterways, not in the soil. So they're irrigated, and you don't need pesticides because it's safe from
Sounds
the
good.
soil. And so you can grow big and healthy vegetables compared to a lot of maintenance when it's grown outside and in, under weather changes and
In nature.
parasites and bugs that eat everything. But what they realize is that the hydroponic, that is a safe container, has half the vitamins than the tomatoes that grow in the harsh conditions and have to fight the parasites and whatnot. And that's an analogy of life, is that the stresses are an element of our growth and intelligence. Without, for that, glorifying, I need more stress in my life, right? Life provides enough. You just need to accept dealing with that.
Okay, but so this is also going out to, I know, people who have dreams like I do in my heart around not having that split that I've talked to you about. The split of having to go for a normal job when actually I wish my whole life could be astrology. And now you say this, but your whole life is astrology, right? So how can you comment on that?
I mean, I was lucky in some ways, and I was crazy in some ways, and maybe courageous as well. That early on, astrology just rang true, and there was no plan B. It's like, that's what I'm doing, and I don't have an alternative, because the truth is I'm not good at other things.
Yeah. I don't believe that.
I mean, it's true. I'm not a good businessman. I'm not a good salesman. I'm not very good with my hands.
You'd be a great tour guide, for example.
Okay. I wanted to be, an artist. That was part of what I was doing when I was starting. I was into music and sound engineering. But really, I wasn't that good at it. And so in some ways, I found what I was good at. And what I say I was lucky is that I managed, people came and wanted readings, and it came to me, like life accepted it. So I was in sync. It evolves organically. But yeah, I lived hand to mouth, I didn't have savings. My lifestyle is very much a lot of trust.
Neptunian,
in that sense. And, being an astrologer means that you are not relying on security as much. You have to be very creative. And I have those faculties to make it work, to be self-employed, to be self-motivated. I don't need a boss to give me guidelines. I don't need an external motivation. So that's part of how I'm wired.
But do you see what I'm talking about? This split that I think many people, no matter, I mean, there could be many ways of experiencing this split between, in a way, spirit and matter, in a way, simplifying it completely. Because of course there's spirit in having, that daily life too, but that longing to get more of Neptune, I guess.
No, I agree. And I think that unless there is in the chart a very specific indication that, you need to recover some kind of skip step, and you cannot fully bloom as, in your spiritual power, your spiritual life, in most cases, that's not the reality. In most cases, it's a matter of patience and timing, and it will happen as if you keep being present for that.
Another thing I want to... Oh, were you going to say more?
What I want to add, you spoke about spirit and matter.
Yeah.
If you speak about yourself, my question to you is, how does it work for you? Like, are you at peace between spirit and matter, or are you struggling with it?
Still struggling, yeah.
And so the moment you're struggling, it becomes a dichotomy. And so it's either money or spirit, and you can't have them balanced.
Right. It's one way to look at it. But another way I look at it is to, as much as I can, decorate my life as a retreat, actually. And now I've been with you on this retreat, and it's been filled with mountains that I can't bring to my own life at home, but it's in the same... That's why I love being here with you, because it's in the same intention. I feel it's living life to the fullest, and I do that for myself. So even though I could have different visions, then with what I have, with the daily life I have, I make it as much as a retreat as possible. I make the most of my days. I simply do. As much as I can. Yes. So in that sense, from that perspective, I'm accepting it.
And I think that if you keep going, like we said, there's going to be a stage where you say there's no plan B.
Yeah.
This is my life. It has to work. But another thing I can say for myself, if I use that as an example, the motivation was also because, like, I felt that what I was doing was useful and important.
Yeah.
That there's a need for it in the world. It's kind of maybe delusional, but it served me. And so that made me stick to it. And, if something didn't work, then I'm going to do something else, to activate it. So that sense that it's not just about, I want to feel that my life is great. It's also the meaning that it is important and that it's needed, and that gave that quality of service. And I'm definitely delusional about it, in the sense that I think everybody should learn astrology.
Yeah. But you're also realistic enough to see that you have a crowd, and that crowd keeps regenerating, keeps coming new, adding people to that. But you have a certain audience, people like me, who can feel, okay, this is good. It's not just good, it's like soul food, right? This is what I'm longing for. I'm hoping also, I don't know, you can disillusion this, but I'm hoping that the times also are gonna change, because I think this is the most important thing in the world, therapeutic astrology in particular. I definitely do. Maybe time is gonna change something as well, in terms of what's possible for people who are a little bit out of the ordinary with their vision.
I believe so. And I believe that the age of the internet has been a good help for that. I mean, I started my path in astrology before, at least as a student, before the internet revolution. And I began practicing just as it was starting, but just the budding edge. But it's undoubtedly true that technology has helped the field of astrology in particular, but also many entrepreneurial ventures. The ability to work from anywhere and connect with the world has been a big help to practically reach clients, reach people. And you have, astrologers reaching masses now.
Yeah.
So I think it's in many fields. So I agree.
So the internet is gonna help. Let's change to my next question, which is about Pluto in Aquarius and that whole 20-year period. I know you're not going into depth. I can hear you sighing, but just like initial thoughts on that, just something.
Yeah.
What is that? What is this era that we are now in it?
I mean, many people idealize Aquarius and Pluto in Aquarius and think that Capricorn is all rigid and old fashioned. And first of all, it's fascinating to see how Pluto works through the signs. If we look back in time and you see it works like a clock, like
It's so wild.
it's so wild.
Yeah.
How in Capricorn, you had statues falling down and you had a lot of revisiting of what is true and what is not.
And hierarchies and yeah.
So in Aquarius, it in essence, the Aquarius brings about at its best the highest, finest quality of being a human being, the higher intelligence, the higher self. When you speak about the lower self and the higher self, Aquarius speaks to that more mature, enlightened, conscious part of you. And so the potential is to really rise, elevate the vibration collectively. When you raise the vibration, you don't need wars. You don't need to hurt each other. You see the higher frequency that is available, that is within reach. But the essence is that Pluto speaks about the shadow. So the message of Pluto in Aquarius is that in order to rise higher, you need to be able to go deeper. So there is no reaching the sun if you don't have deep roots. And that is where Aquarius often fails, is that they go up quickly to higher frequencies and high ideals, and they don't have, the root system. So you have the danger of a tall tree collapsing. So anything that is too rapid, things that are growing too fast, or instant enlightenment and raising the frequency without doing the shadow work is a problem.
Yeah, because you're missing the interception as well, right?
And integration.
Yeah.
And the analogy of the tree is just very graphic, that you need the compost, you need the dirt, the mulch, in order to have beautiful leaves and to have a strong trunk. And so we see that through many spiritual traditions are going to be tested, where you come with high expectations, with high frequency. Can you actually survive in your relationships? Can you actually hold a job longer than X period of time? So speaking beautifully and having noble ideas need backup. The same way we look at technology and the intelligence of humanity, as well as artificial intelligence, which is created by human intelligence, and how quickly we could now discover life on new planets. And we have the James Webb telescope that reveals hidden layers of the universe, and we can find new cures for Alzheimer and dementia, and so things can progress so rapidly. And at the same time, the shadow of the misuse of artificial intelligence, the misuse of science, is part of the paradigm.
Mm. So when you say that about shadows, and that's Pluto, I also think about the future for psychotherapy, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, what do you think? I mean, of course, we already have a lot of online going on, and yeah, different services. I actually just discovered that I have some insurance where I have a psychologist, and I tried to apply for that, because I wanted to have that paid. I go to therapy frequently, surely, but so yeah, they could pay a few times for me, but I didn't know anything about the psychologist. Like, I couldn't, of course, use the one I wanted. I had to use a certain online platform and no name. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm not doing that.
Mhm.
Not sorry, that's up to myself. But it's just, that's really, I wouldn't feel at all that would be helpful for me to talk
Yeah.
to a stranger.
Yeah.
I would need to know the person's
But that
philosophy.
goes back to the Aquarius, higher mind versus the Pluto, the intimacy, the vulnerability. So you need to feel safe. You need to know who you're talking to. And it's not just because there's someone, a big brain there,
No,
that it's not enough.
no.
It's exactly that. But I also think that um, with Pluto in Aquarius, there are going to be new models of therapy. We're going to still look at where we're stuck and what needs healing. But I believe this paradigm will bring new approaches to therapy. And astrology, I think, will be part of that, integrated in the therapeutic model, at least to some extent. I think there will be gain in that. But I also think that because Aquarius also represents the brain and represents the nervous system, there will be new knowledge, new understanding of not only, talk about your childhood and process the trauma, but there may also be ways to kind of rewire the brain, realign the brain so that it doesn't, it breaks patterns. So we're not,
Like neurologically?
I think
Rewiring
so. I
Yeah.
believe that's possible
Yeah.
during this transit.
Yeah. So innovative ways of trauma healing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
working on the neurological system.
I have one more question. Let's see what that is. Oh yeah, I have one more question for you. It's just I wanted to repeat a thing that you've said a few times. I think only in a selected group. I'm not sure, but I haven't. I think you've only said it within circles. Let's see.
Let's hear it.
So around astrology and how it's being appreciated at the moment, I want you to talk about that, because, well, it's so accessible in a way, and yet the deeper part of it, it's so funny because I thought for years that I knew about astrology, but I had never read a serious book about it, right? And many people come to me with that experience that they know about astrology, but they've never studied it. So in a way, it's really accessible. In another way, it's you gotta do some footwork to really get to it. Can you talk to this theme about appreciating the depth of astrology?
I think there's a lot to that. It's a privilege. The generation born with Neptune, Uranus, and Neptune in Aquarius, are naturally wired to connect the cosmos, and the stars with life on Earth. So this is a generation that naturally, many of them, obviously, not everyone, but they find astrology compelling. They don't need proof. they're not as skeptical as earlier generations.
You can really feel that on people, age-wise, how skeptical they are, for sure.
But we can definitely go back to the principle of if you go high too quickly, you are going to misuse the knowledge. What I often say in my teachings is that astrology is a sacred language, and we're dealing with extremely sensitive situations. When I see online that people, post their charts and say, to a completely public forum, oh, I'm having sexual problems with my partner, and they expect something so intimate to be discussed by amateur strangers.
Yeah.
There's something totally not integrated in that and dangerous. Or they talk about their kids, and so you start to have Facebook reader who give you, parental counseling based on your chart. So it's not doing astrology justice. We need to be grateful that this knowledge is available and honor it. And we are in a time where it's enough to have a computer, it's enough to have money, to be entitled. I paid for it, give it to me.
Yeah.
And so there's no protocol, there's no rite of passage, there's no proper training. Everything is easily accessible, for good and bad.
It's I really have to reflect further on that thought, because there's something about what you say there. I've paid for it, now give it to me. Like, I'm a paying customer here. Why didn't you provide?
Entitlement.
Yeah.
And I think paying for something is valuable because you had to work to get the money
It's
to
an
pay.
investment. Yeah.
It's a resource, but that doesn't mean that you're emotionally ready. It doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want with it. There's still that aspect of maturity that needs to be developed with such a powerful, sensitive tool.
That astrology is, yeah.
But it's true for many things, even nature. I'm working with conservation. I work with lions and all animals. And there's that thing that, I paid for the safari. Where are the lions? And, I'm not honoring the fact that they have their own lives, and maybe they're not going to show up for me, even though I paid for it. So that sense of consumerism, that everything has a price tag, is over the top.
I see. That's similar, because it's like, I wanted to show up. I want the spirits to show up. Yeah.
I paid for enlightenment.
Yeah. Give me realizations now. Yeah, but and to add to that, it's so precious, I think, that people are reaching out, though. I mean, it's misunderstood that you can get the help you seek in an online forum like that, but that you're reaching out and you're like, it's like, I know it's out there somewhere. It's just.
But I think, if I understand you, I think that we should not dismiss this accessibility and the privilege of our generation. Because it's great that there's a lot of astrology content, and it's great that you can travel to the rest of the world and experience Africa and experience Antarctica, but it needs to come with respect. So the accessibility, the ease, and the advance of civilization is wonderful. It needs to be honored, and there needs to be gratitude for it, not take it for granted.
So thank you for reminding us all about the sacred nature of astrology. I think if you're not familiar with astrology in depth, then you don't know that it should be sacred. So thank you for that, and thank you for everything, Maurice Fernandez. No, that's too much. Just thank you for pieces, because it's too much. So thank you for everything. I'm continuing to study under you, even though I graduated Maurice Fernandez Evolutionary School of Astrology, or something like that. So I just want to recommend your program, and I want to recommend. Now I can recommend your retreats as well. I'm a new person to the retreat part, but I'm definitely doing it again. All of your things, is it like this?
The retreat, like
Yeah,
what?
like what I've experienced. I don't know if I can recommend it if it's something completely different, but there's yoga, there's hiking, and then there's astrology.
To me, anything I do, I want to bring the values that I support.
Yeah.
And I'm someone who's usually hands-on. I don't like to lead things with a remote control. It's high maintenance. It takes a lot of energy, but it is something that, if I think what you're describing, part of being in a retreat and studying astrology, to me, it's important to not just be in the head.
Yeah.
So we need to experience nature. We need to do important yoga exercises, and we need to cook together. And so all these components make the experience rich.
Yeah.
But it's part of the value system of coming to things more holistically.
Is it a way that you express yourself personally? Like
What?
it's the retreats, the meeting people. Like you said, it's based on your values.
Yeah, it's the way I lead my life.
Yeah.
I try to.
Yeah. 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 Well, me too. I love it, and so I'll of course link to your pages, all of the stuff.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
Ah.
Many blessings.